Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of CleanTechnica's news broadcast. In this week's show, we have one wind story, 2 battery stories, 3 EV stories, 5 Tesla stories, and 1 synthetic biology story, all in that order. Let's get to it. Wind. Just like with rockets in the 60s or airplanes in the 2000s, same is true for wind turbines. Bigger is better. Now, the biggest names in the industry are Siemens Gamesa and General Electric. Now, General Electric announced their Haliade X in March 2018, which for a while was considered to be the biggest wind turbine out there. It's rated at 12 megawatts and has a 107-meter blade length. This week, Siemens Gamesa finally announced their response. The name is not very flashy, it's simply called the SG14-222DD. It's a 14 megawatt wind turbine with blades that are 108 meters long. Yes, a whole extra meter. Which of the two is better still remains to be seen because both models can actually be upgraded. Now, Siemens does seem to be a full year behind General Electric. However, considering the fact that General Electric has a much smaller market share, Siemens might still prevail. One thing is for sure, competition is good, it lowers prices, and in any case, the more renewable energy out there, the better. Northvolt. This week, Swedish battery manufacturer Northvolt announced a new product, the Voltpack mobile system. It's a massive portable battery pack designed to replace diesel generators that are still commonly used everywhere. The 250 kilowatt system uses modular battery packs and has a capacity ranging between 245 and 1,225 kilowatt hours, depending on what the customer needs. Now, a couple of interesting features worth pointing out are the fact that it's first of all, it's liquid cooled and it has a central interface hub. For something like a construction site, 1,225 kilowatt hours will be more than sufficient. And they can always replace a depleted module. The question is how competitive this will be, and that all depends on Northvolt and their pricing. What's really impressive is that they really built and designed this all from the ground up. Everything, including the batteries themselves, the inverter, and of course the battery management system or the BMS. Now, while Northvolt might still be small today, the enormous factories that they are currently building in Sweden and Germany will make them a market leader in Europe in no time. Svolt. Tesla's battery day was delayed to June, so in the meantime we're going to continue working on our massive battery video to make it as good as we possibly can. However, since today's story is actually related to some of the topics discussed in that video, we're going to get a small topics of the information that is to come. Tesla and other manufacturers want to reduce or even eliminate the amount of cobalt in their batteries. Battery chemistries like NMC and NCA are currently very popular. However, cobalt, it's a stabilizing agent and you could technically do without it. And so if you remove it from the recipe, you basically get either nickel manganese or nickel aluminum. And Tesla, with their Maxwell dry cell technology, is very likely to be making nickel aluminum batteries. However, they wouldn't be the first ones to make batteries without cobalt because there's another company out there called Svolt that is soon going to start selling their batteries that they call NMX. Svolt announced their NMX cell technology back in July 2019. In a recent presentation, they provided more details about the NMX products they plan to sell. They're working on a number of variants, including a 115 ampere-hour cell with an energy density of 245 watt-hours per kilogram, and a 226 ampere-hour cell with an energy density of 240 watt-hour per kilogram. For an NMC battery, that is already pretty decent, and keep in mind that this doesn't have cobalt, so it's NM, so that's really impressive actually. Tesla, on the other hand, is more likely to produce NA batteries because currently in their cars they use NCA, not NMC. However, since they do use NMC in their stationary storage, Tesla might actually end up producing both, just like Panasonic produces both for Tesla right now at Giga Nevada. Dyson. We've been hearing rumors that Dyson was going to make an electric vehicle for ages now, and there was even the notion that the windshield wipers might even blow a stream of air to either get rid of the drops or prevent them from falling onto the windshield in the first place, based on Dyson's airblade technology. James Dyson suggested this idea himself all the way back in an interview given in 2009. Then later in October 2019, Dyson announced that they canceled the EV project because it was not commercially viable. Usually such secret projects that get cancelled never see the light of day in any form or fashion. However, in an interview with The Times, CEO and founder James Dyson showed the prototype off. He confirmed that the project was cancelled because it was not commercially viable. However, he did show off what could have been. The vehicle would have been a 7-seater, and it would have had Dyson's proprietary solid-state battery technology inside, which would have given it a range of 600 miles per charge, an acceleration at 4.8 seconds, and a maximum speed of 125 miles, which is quite close to the long-range Tesla Model X. I have to wonder how accurate those numbers really are, since this is obviously still a prototype and not something that is manufactured en masse in a huge factory. So it's cool, but it's just a prototype. Clean EVs. The Union for Concerned Scientists published a pretty good fact sheet on CleanTechnica this week to show that electric vehicles are indeed cleaner than internal combustion engine vehicles, even if the electric vehicles are charged from a grid that uses fossil fuels. As you can see on this map, there are only a few areas with a mile per gallon level lower than 49. That is 20.8 kilometer per liter. Let me just show you here. I photoshopped it a bit to add the kilometer per liter values so everyone outside the US can understand as well. This beats any traditional internal combustion engine vehicle, and only a hybrid like the Toyota Prius at 50 miles per gallon performs better than those few places under 50. California at 122 miles per gallon just shows how electric vehicles can easily be twice as clean as the cleanest newest internal combustion engine vehicles. In fact, it is 4 times cleaner than the new internal combustion engine vehicle average mile per gallon. And that is for new ones and not the old ones that are still out there on the road. The image can be found in the article, and the link to the article can be found down in the video description down below, and a pop-up should appear in this corner. If you press that, it should also lead you to that article. If anyone tries to sell you this horse shit again, please show them this map. EU EV incentives. The next EV story has to do with the EU. Now, both last week as well as the week before, we already reported that the EU wants to put being green at the center of their pandemic recovery plan. Now, this week, we learned about a draft EU document that Bloomberg somehow got their hands on. And basically what this draft states is that the EU wants to incentivize auto manufacturers to create electric vehicles. And they plan to do this through a couple of means. They plan to do this by making all EVs exempt from the 20% VAT tax. They plan to invest 40 to 60 billion euros in EV drivetrain technology. And they plan to double the existing budget to build 2 million EV chargers by 2025. There is one other proposal that plans to invest 20 billion euros in the next few years in an EU-wide purchasing facility for clean vehicles. But what that means, we're not really sure. Personally, I think that this budget of 80 billion euros is better spent on the consumer in the form of an incentive. Now, of course, if you divide the population of the EU by this 80 billion, you only get something like 180 euros per person. But if you think of it as something for 10% of the population, you're already at 1,800 euros. And really, people buy cars once every 7, 10, or 15 years. So basically, in this sense, and since these plans are only for the next few years, the incentive could be as big as 5,000 euros per person, and the incentives would then be renewed after a couple of years or expanded. Now, some countries, they already eliminated the VAT or gave some incentives in addition to the VAT or instead of the removal of the VAT. But still, in many countries, it's insufficient. And, it's always the more incentives, the better. That's how you really drive EV adoption, rather than giving the money away, incentivizing the car manufacturers who already realize that if they don't electrify, then they're toast. Mazda finally started the production of their first electric vehicle, the MX-30, in Japan this week. While it remains unclear whether this vehicle will launch in the US or not, it is supposed to reach Europe sometime in fall. Now, unfortunately, this vehicle only has a 35 kilowatt-hour battery for a range of 125 miles or 200 kilometers per charge. While it has sufficient range to get to the other side of town and back, something like a daily commute, a longer trip might be a problem. I live in the Netherlands, and while we have a lot of people here, the country is geographically quite small. And even though I live in the middle of the country, I still wouldn't be able to pick someone up from the airport without having to charge on the way back home. That's not a lot. That's problematic. Tesla. This week we have a bunch of Tesla news and we are starting off in Shanghai. Now, for the first time ever, Tesla long-range Model 3s that were made locally in Giga Shanghai were delivered to customers this week. Now, it remains unclear whether the battery cells within these long-range Model 3s were imported from Giga Nevada or whether these are the first ones that were actually made by LG Chem in China and then shipped to Giga Nevada. Then for the second bit of news, we still stay in China because the director of Tesla China, Tao Lin, in an interview has said that next month, Tesla is going to be able to produce 4,000 Model 3s in Shanghai. If they manage to achieve this, they would literally surpass what this area was designed for originally. They would exceed the design capacity already, which is, just crazy, but hey, it's Tesla. Phase 2, where the Model Y will be built, is also on schedule. Tesla plans to produce and deliver the first Model Ys made at Giga Shanghai in Q1 2021. This will quite literally double the output of the factory within just 1 year, simply by introducing a new model, the Model Y. And for the next bit of news, we finally move on to the United States because the location of the next Gigafactory, the Cybertruck factory, has been hotly debated. And as of this week, we have learned that Nashville has likely been eliminated from consideration, with Austin, Texas and Tulsa, Oklahoma looking like the main contenders. Having said that, there could be other candidates that we don't know about. And then a few states to the west, we have Giga Nevada, and Panasonic CFO in the quarterly investor call said some pretty interesting things. First of all, he said that Giga Nevada, for them at least, is finally profitable. And that's great. But another thing that he said is that because of this, they are now in talks with Tesla to try to expand their operations, expand the building at Giga Nevada. And this is pretty puzzling and unlikely to actually happen because Tesla, they're widely considered to start producing their own cells soon enough. So does an expansion really make sense? Tesla needs terawatt hours worth of battery cells at the lowest cost possible. Not twice as much as Panasonic finally managed to build after 4 years. They're still at 1/3 of where they're supposed to be and 1/100th of where Tesla will ultimately need. Now, Panasonic might finally be ready to start expanding their footprint again, but I'm sure Tesla will say something like, too little, too late. And this wouldn't be the first time that Panasonic wanted to expand the building to compensate for their shortfalls and simply throw more money at the problem. This is literally the reason why Tesla put a halt to Gigafactory expansion in the first place. And while yes, Tesla might still need Panasonic cells for the foreseeable future before they manage to produce their own cells at large volumes. But how long is it really going to take Tesla to ramp up production? Is this really a smart investment for either company? It doesn't seem that way unless Panasonic can start selling these batteries to other manufacturers. And there's also the fact that it's very difficult to hire new people in this area. It is literally one of the reasons why growing Gigafactory 1 in size has been so difficult this entire time. Now we're just going to have to wait and see. In the meantime, the next bit of news is another minor rant. Elon Musk announced that they are again raising the price of full self-driving by $1,000 on July 1st. Full self-driving will now cost $8,000 in total because the additional features make it more valuable. And in general, I agree with this, but I really sympathize with the people who pre-ordered a Model 3, some as long ago as 2018, and still are unable to order because Tesla is not allowing them to order in their area or in their country. And that's unfair to these people because they were willing to buy it then and there, and they have to wait and see how the price keeps rising for way more than they originally bargained for, even though it's not their fault that they can't order. I think Tesla should really, allow people to pay for full self-driving as much as it costed the day that they pre-ordered the vehicle. Synthetic biology. As always, before diving into any SynBio story, synthetic biology, I'd like to recommend my article on the topic as a perfect beginner's guide. The link to that can be found in the video description down below, and a pop-up should be appearing right here that will take you straight to the article. Now, while SynBio is often linked to health and medicine, really the technologies behind it are going to expand into a bunch of different sectors in the coming years, decades, which include clean meat, material synthesis, and in general, other clean tech. Now, when it comes to giving our bodies or our cells specific instructions on what to do is like trying to press the right buttons. And really, there are a lot of buttons out there to press. And, a good comparison would be the inside of a cockpit. What most medicines, foods, supplements, natural medicines do is they press down an area of buttons that makes the cell react in some specific way. Now, obviously, medicine designed in a lab is a lot more effective than food. It also presses down a lot of other buttons that basically end up causing the side effects that we see in medicine. And today we're talking about a synthetic biology startup called Octant that just left stealth mode. And now that you've been primed about this whole buttons concept, here's how Octant explains that in a more scientific way. The best drugs in complex diseases usually target central signaling proteins that control the coordinated actions of hundreds of genes and result in cellular behaviors. Most of the drugs were pretty simple in design, or as Octant would say, discovered through the observation and modification of fairly simple molecules rather than targeted design. Such molecules tend to be very dirty, sometimes activating dozens of targets and multiple pathways in each target. Those unintended buttons being pushed down are basically the side effects of the medicine. And, it's like using a big hammer to push down the buttons. You'll hit your target, but also a lot of other stuff. And Octant further says that designer drugs in the past have failed for two reasons. First is that they weren't strong enough. It's like trying to press a button with a straw. And the other is that they were not complex enough. And I guess the best way to explain that is that the drug didn't press Control-Alt-Delete simultaneously to actually make something happen. They said efforts over the last 30 years to make these types of drugs more specific have largely failed due to on-target toxicity or lack of efficacy. The solution to the problem lies in lowering the costs for DNA synthesis. Not DNA sequencing, which is basically just reading the genome, but DNA synthesis, which is more like printing DNA that you programmed or designed in some way. Now, this is only viable today because of massive reductions in cost for DNA synthesis that Octant is taking advantage of. Where in the past, printing 10,000 genomes would cost something like $2 million, today that only costs $20,000. So this opens up entirely new possibilities. Then there's also the fact that understanding the effect that one genome has on a multitude of functions is like this big complicated interconnected web of action and reaction. And to understand this, I always keep going back to this short clip from Google where they show how with more powerful processors, links between genomes and effects can be identified more quickly. In this example, cancer medicine discovery is sped up from one ping every 10 minutes to a few pings every few seconds that the scientist can then investigate. And I really like the way Octant said this. This confluence of rapid progress enables a single person to conduct biological experiments at scales recently impossible at even the world's largest academic and industrial laboratories. Basically what they do is they alter the DNA in human cells to become more like cashier registers. They then expose these cells to various drugs, and it prints out a receipt of everything that was scanned. However, in addition to just listing everything that was scanned, it also denotes the complex interactions between the different proteins. It's basically listing the colors of paints that were combined as well as the resulting color. Now, Octant once again is showing how reducing the cost in DNA sequencing, DNA synthesis, and computational power brings entirely new things within the realm of possibility. Now, this story is as much about protein synthesis as it is about DNA synthesis, and really it's all not that much more different than what Andrej Karpathy recently said in his presentation about designing Tesla's full self-driving software. The more we learn about machine learning and artificial intelligence, the more we learn how to automate this entire learning process. Because, adding more human effort at every step is just not scalable, while adding more computers, more computational power is a lot simpler. Now, this will allow synthetic biology to do all kinds of things, not just cure disease and improve humanity. It will be able to do things like solve climate change. Design a tree that, for example, grows solar panels instead of leaves. Make a smoke detector that detects viruses, this small, in every house. Design new proteins that can help create new materials, or that can allow us to create existing materials more cheaply. The possibilities are limitless, and I really look forward to seeing people do very creative stuff with this technology that might be beyond our current imagination. And, you know, there are some very powerful people and institutions that agree with this, like ARK Invest and Bill Gates, that are also talking about this. And, you know, I think the next 30 years are going to be very exciting. This field is definitely worth watching closely. And that was it for this week's broadcast. We hope that you guys liked it, and if you did, please consider sharing it. Our news broadcast is still relatively new, and if you'd send along to your friends that care about clean tech, we'd appreciate it. Giving this video a thumbs up would also help us along. Now, everything that we talk about in this news broadcast, we also try to write articles about, and the links to those can be found in the video description down below, and sometimes here with this little pop-up. Other than that, I wish you guys a wonderful weekend, and till next time, see ya.